There's a moment you stop thinking for yourself. You don't notice it because it feels like choice. You think you're being inspired, but you're being programmed. They don't take your mind by force. They invite themselves in. At first it feels harmless, a conversation, an idea, a shared belief, something that feels right, something that gives you belonging. But over time, something shifts. You start speaking differently, thinking differently, defending ideas that once made you uneasy, not because you've been convinced, but because you've been converted. This isn't hypnosis. This is possession, and it doesn't need demons. It only needs influence. Influence begins with trust. We let people, ideologies, or groups in because they make us feel safe, understood, seen. Every manipulator, every movement, every cult begins with that spark of recognition. It's not control at first. It's connection. They mirror your values. They echo your frustrations. They speak your language of pain. And before you realize it, they begin writing new definitions. What is right? What is wrong? Who is us? Who is them? You don't even resist, because resistance feels like betrayal. This is how possession begins, not in confrontation, but in comfort. Cognitive psychologists call it internalization. It's when external beliefs become internal truths. When you first hear an idea, it lives outside you. You can observe it, question it, test it, but repetition, emotion, and social validation move it inward. Soon, it stops being the idea you believe in and becomes the belief that defines you. It fuses with your identity. Criticism of it feels like criticism of you. And at that point, logic, evidence, and persuasion no longer work, because you're not protecting the truth anymore. You're protecting yourself. This is the first true moment of possession. Let's take a case that changed psychology forever. Jonestown, 1978. Jim Jones didn't recruit followers. He absorbed them. He began as a preacher for equality and racial justice. He spoke the language of love, unity, and community, and slowly replaced their faith in God with faith in Him. He didn't command obedience. He earned devotion. Members began cutting ties with family, friends, and work, not because he forced them to, but because they believed they were choosing freedom. When Jones ordered over 900 people to drink poison, they did not see it as death. They saw it as loyalty. That's the terrifying brilliance of psychological possession. It turns control into voluntary submission. Today, you don't need a cult to be possessed. You just need a screen. Algorithms don't control your actions directly. They control what you see, what you believe, and who you become. Each like, comment, and recommendation acts as micro-validation, rewarding emotional bias and punishing independent thought. Slowly, your digital feed becomes a mirror. Then, it becomes a prison. Then, it becomes you. You don't choose what to believe. You choose what feels familiar. And familiarity is the oldest drug in psychology. Why do we let it happen? Why do intelligent people surrender their autonomy so easily? Because belief feels safer than doubt. The human brain hates uncertainty. It burns energy. It feels like danger. So when someone or something offers clarity, the brain rewards it. Neuroimaging shows a dopamine spike when our worldview is confirmed. Each time someone agrees with you, your brain whispers, "You're safe here." That's why echo chambers are addictive. They feel like truth, but they're just comfort disguised as certainty. And once comfort becomes your compass, you're no longer thinking, you're believing. Possession ends where identity begins. Because once influence fuses with who you think you are, you stop defending ideas, you defend yourself. That's why cult members can't snap out of it. That's why political zealots double down when proven wrong. That's why online tribes fight like survival depends on their side winning. To challenge their belief is to threaten their existence. And the mind will always protect itself, even if that means destroying the truth. The mind was meant to be free, but freedom is terrifying when you've lived inside a cage of comfort. Now we'll go deeper into the architects of possession. The people, systems, and ideologies that perfect the art of identity control. Because the scariest part isn't that they take your thoughts, it's that you give them away. Possession doesn't need a demon, it just needs your trust. Every system of control needs an architect, someone or something who understands that minds aren't conquered through fear. They're designed through repetition, emotion, and belonging. The most dangerous manipulators don't yell commands. They whisper comfort. They don't take your freedom. They convince you it was never worth keeping. This video is about them, the invisible engineers who build the psychological cages we willingly enter. The architects of possession. Power has evolved. It used to rely on violence, now it relies on consent. You don't need soldiers to control a population when you can control perception. Propaganda, advertising, social design all share one thing in common. They shape emotion before shaping belief. When Edward Bernays, the father of modern public relations, studied Freud's work, he realized something revolutionary. People don't make rational choices. They make emotional ones and justify them later. So Bernays weaponized psychology. He sold war as patriotism. He sold cigarettes as symbols of liberation. He turned desire into obedience. That was the first layer of the modern architecture of possession, emotional framing. Don't tell people what to think, make them feel it. Today, those architects have evolved into code. Behind every scroll, every click, every like, there's an algorithm quietly studying you. It learns your rhythm, your fears, your patterns of curiosity and outrage. Then, it builds a world tailored to your emotions. A psychological terrarium that looks infinite, but is actually a loop. You see what keeps you engaged. You engage with what feels familiar. And slowly, your digital environment becomes an echo of your unconscious mind. This is not surveillance. This is emotional design. And here's the twist. You think you're consuming information, but information is consuming you. Every era breeds leaders who understand this art instinctively. They don't need to shout. They only need to resonate. They use 3 psychological keys to unlock mass identity fusion. 1, belonging. You are one of us. 2, threat. They are against us. 3, sacrifice. We must suffer to survive. This formula built nations, religions, movements, and mobs. Hitler, Jim Jones, Charles Manson all used it. They didn't just lead people, they possessed them. Once the crowd fuses identity with cause, you can command anything, because now logic isn't required. Loyalty is enough. And here's the most disturbing truth. They believed in what they were doing. Every manipulator starts as a believer, but belief, mixed with charisma and power, is a chemical weapon. Possession is sustained by emotion, not logic. The architects know this, so they engineer emotional dependency. Every cult, brand, political ideology, and online tribe relies on the same neurochemical sequence. Fear, then relief, after that reward. They trigger fear. The world is against you. They offer relief, but we understand you. Then they reward loyalty, likes, attention, validation, salvation. This cycle floods the brain with dopamine and oxytocin. You don't just believe the message, you feel connected to the messenger. The mind becomes addicted not to truth, but to the chemical comfort of certainty. That's why people don't leave manipulative systems. They fear withdrawal more than deception. Possession isn't only emotional, it's economic. Corporations discovered that the surest way to control behavior is to control identity through consumption. You are what you buy. You are what you wear. You are what you post. And the deeper that identification goes, the easier it is to manipulate. The goal isn't to sell products, it's to sell selves. The modern consumer isn't a customer. They're a host, and the brand is the parasite. It shapes their taste, their status, their values. They wear their allegiance on their sleeve, literally. And when a brand becomes sacred, criticism feels like blasphemy. But who is really behind it all? Who builds the design? sometimes no one. That's the scariest part. The system has become self-sustaining. Algorithms that manipulate for profit, leaders who manipulate for loyalty, audiences that manipulate each other for validation. The architects are now everywhere. Every influencer who sells false certainty, every ideologue who feeds division, every system that rewards outrage over truth. Possession no longer needs a mastermind. It's built into the structure of attention itself. We're all both architects and victims. Possession is no longer a ritual. It's routine. It's woven into the fabric of belief, emotion, and technology. And while some use it knowingly, most are simply repeating the pattern that once possessed them. To see through it, you must learn to recognize the blueprint, not in others, but in yourself. Because the first step to breaking free is realizing that the voice inside your head may not be yours anymore. The architects have done their work well. The question is, will you keep building for them? They say possession is irreversible, that once the mind fuses with the influence, it never truly separates again. But that's not entirely true. Liberation isn't about escape, it's about recognition. You can't break free from a system you can't see. You can only transcend it by mapping its design, piece by piece, until the architecture of control collapses under awareness. This final act is about that process, the deconstruction of influence, the anatomy of mental liberation. Step 1, the mirror of awareness. The first step to breaking possession is to locate the foreign voices in your head. Every belief, every desire, every fear. Ask yourself, who put this there? Was it experience or exposure? Did it come from reflection or repetition? Possession begins the moment you stop questioning origin. Liberation begins the moment you trace it back. Neuroscientists call this metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe your own thought process. It's the difference between thinking and noticing yourself think. The possessed person reacts. The liberated person watches their reactions. And in that distance, the chain breaks. That's why manipulators fear awareness. Because once you see their mechanism, it loses power. A magician's illusion only works when you stare where they tell you to. Step 2, the disidentification process. The second step is disidentification. This is where it hurts. Every system of possession fuses your identity with your loyalty. It tells you that disagreement equals betrayal, that leaving equals death. To disidentify, you must confront the emotional glue that binds belief to self-image. Ask, if I stop believing this, who would I be? That question terrifies the possessed because they've outsourced their sense of meaning. In cults, this is the moment people call the dark night of the soul. In psychology, it's known as ego death. In spiritual terms, it's awakening. When the external narrative collapses, a void opens, and that void is sacred. It's the birthplace of the authentic self. Only from emptiness can new autonomy form. Step 3, emotional deconditioning. Possession is emotional before it's logical. So liberation must be emotional detox. The manipulator controls through triggers, fear, guilt, reward. So you must reclaim your emotional baseline. This means learning to sit with discomfort without seeking external reassurance. In neuroscience, this is called self-regulation. In practical terms, it's freedom from emotional puppeteering. Because once you can feel anxiety without obeying it, once you can feel guilt without apologizing for existing, once you can feel anger without projecting it outward, you reclaim emotional sovereignty. No system can enslave a mind that doesn't flinch. Step 4, rebuilding identity from within. The fourth step is the slow reconstruction of identity, one built internally, not externally. You start by creating a new frame of reference. What do I actually believe without approval? Write it, speak it, live it, then test it against reality, not ideology. Psychologists call this self-authorship, the ability to define your values independent of inherited systems. It's the opposite of tribal identity. You no longer belong, you become. You are not your ideology. You are not your trauma. You are not your role. You are the awareness choosing among them. And when that realization sets in, when yourself becomes a verb, not a label, the architecture of possession collapses completely. Step 5, strategic isolation, the detox period. But liberation isn't instant. It requires distance. The 5th step is strategic isolation. Every manipulative structure, cult, ideology, toxic relationship, online echo chamber depends on constant reinforcement. Remove that reinforcement, and the programming begins to decay. But it's not easy, because silence feels like death to the conditioned mind. You'll crave the noise you once despised. You'll miss the cage you hated. That's withdrawal. It's psychological detox. The body craving emotional validation the way addicts crave drugs. Survive that, and you reach what mystics call the desert of the real. It's empty but pure, painful but honest. That's where true independence is born. Step 6, the integration phase. After isolation comes integration. Freedom without direction becomes chaos. So the liberated mind must reintegrate, but carefully. This means re-engaging with the world without surrendering to it. You return to society not as a believer, but as a witness. You engage in relationships, communities, and ideologies, but now you observe the mechanics. You see the emotional bait, you sense the subtle pull, and you choose consciously whether to participate. This is the highest form of freedom, active awareness in the field of influence. You're no longer a node in someone else's system. You're the observer of systems themselves. The possessed react, the liberated respond. Possession is not always evil. It's the shadow of connection, the proof that we crave meaning so deeply. We'll surrender ourselves to anyone who promises it. But awareness turns that surrender into choice, and choice is sacred. In the end, liberation isn't about isolation. It's about integration without absorption, to live among influence without losing identity. The goal isn't to never be possessed. The goal is to know when you are, because the moment you can name the force that owns you, it no longer owns you. You've just seen how possession begins and how it ends. But there's a darker question ahead. What happens when the manipulator believes they're the victim? Next time we explores the inversion effect, the psychology of victim power. If this video made you think, share it. If it made you question, comment your thoughts below. And if it made you feel seen, subscribe. Because what's coming next rewires everything you thought you knew about control.